Oh, my camera's there.
Are we on the brink of a recession?
I am so excited. Almost like I am Sunday morning eating my cheese grits with some shredded bacon in there. This doesn't
Nailed
work.
it. No, it was so good.
It just doesn't work.
What on
It was
earth
so
was
good.
that?
Yeah,
It was so good. I can't do it. I got to switch. I can't do it.
Remember, you're outside, I'm in.
Wow, that was even more short-lived than I thought.
I was going to try to make it all the way through, and I couldn't do it. I was going to try to see if I could go the whole time.
You have to sit in your seat,
And I
and
was
Ryan has to sit
nowhere
in your
near.
seat.
Hey, I'll bring up my tip screen in a minute so you can give me 20% for moving
all my drinks for me.
Good morning. Happy April Fools. I don't know. This is how creative we are. We thought that would be funny.
I enjoyed it.
I will say this though, Brian. I actually am super excited to be talking about this because there is some very interesting information that just came out. And I don't know if you've seen the headlines yet, but a lot of people are nervous. A lot of people are concerned. A lot of people are wondering, does this mean that doom is impending and we are moving in a bad direction? Are we about to enter into a recession?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I did see the headlines, and I was super happy that we're covering this. Is that whenever you have a quarter that, GDP goes negative, you go, we probably need to pay attention. And that's why here's the headline that's getting all the news right now is Goldman Sachs has raised the odds of a U.S. recession to 35%. Well, duh. Yes, because the projection that just came out was that first quarter GDP is indeed going to go negative.
Yeah, so one of the things I think that would be helpful is how do we define recession? Now this, you may not know this, but this is a little nebulous, but generally speaking, the definition of a recession, or at least a common definition of a recession, is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, meaning that the economy actually shrunk in value, did not increase over a quarter. So if the first quarter just turned out negative, does that mean if we have a second quarter of negative GDP growth that we're going to be in recession? Well, it's not always quite that easy. But the real question I think people are wondering, Brian, is does it matter? Is it important? Is it even a significant thing?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I kind of want to cut through the noise. We'll give you the numbers first just so everybody kind of knows we're on the same page. This is what, as of March 28th, real GDP for first quarter 2025 is projected to be a negative 2.8%. Now realize, they always come back and restate these things. Sometimes it gets restated more positively. Sometimes it goes more negative. But right now we're sitting at that the economy is actually going to contract 2.8%. If you look at the last time we kind of had something like this happen, it was first quarter of 2022.
Yep.
Now, 2022 was not exactly, we didn't even hit the second quarter, so we didn't hit the traditional recession, but still 2022 was not something that I think people get super excited about from an investment standpoint. But it is, I think when in doubt, we should zoom out, but what should people be thinking about?
Yeah, I want you to hold on to that idea that the last time we saw negative GDP growth was in Q1 of 2022. 2022 was a down year in the market, but it was not a recession. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. But I just want you to remember that recession and bear market and downturns aren't always married together. So if you are sitting out there and you're thinking, okay, this just happened, what is it that I need to know? Well,
sell everything, right?
That's right. Of course, obviously. No, of course not. That's the biggest April Fool's joke of all. Yeah. The number one thing that you need to know is that a recession does not necessarily mean poor market performance. And whenever we're faced with times like this, we always want to ask ourselves, okay, have we seen this before? Can we look at history to have any sort of insight into what could or could not happen? And you've seen this chart a ton. This actually shows all of the bear and bull markets from 1942 all the way out until 2024. And what you can see is it shows you how big the bear market was and how long it lasted, and how severe how big the bull market was and how long it lasted, how severe the bear market was, how long it lasted. And then it shows you where recessions took place, like at what parts and points of time were there recessions. What I really think is interesting when you look at this chart is that Sometimes recessions happened while there was a bear market taking place, and sometimes recessions happened while there was still a bull market taking place. So just because you have 2 consecutive negative quarters of GDP growth does not necessarily mean the market's going to perform poorly just because of that.
Well, and when I look at these charts and when you see the recession overlays on there, sometimes, I mean, there's nothing wrong with some pruning. I
Sure.
mean, a lot of the analysts and economists that I follow have been calling, where the S&P and some of the valuation indicators that we were a little overheated. So I think it's okay to expect some volatility, to even have some pruning. But if you look at the overlay of where these recessions typically fall, it is, and a lot of times it's the launch pad for the next phase of a new bull market.
That's right.
So I don't always consider this. It is going to be bad if you are way outside of your skis, and that's probably the great time for us to kind of transition on what do you need to know, and even better yet, what do you need to do so that you don't get caught flat-footed? Because always, whenever I see indicators like GDP growth has gone negative, I'm always in it because the news media is going to try to scare you. But what you ought to do is use this as a tool or an opportunity to take a stress test on your own personal finances to say, have I gotten a little greedy on the way I've been handling my asset allocation and my portfolio? Because right now is not the worst time to reset.
That's right.
And that's a great way for us to kind of figure out what are the next steps for you to go forward.
Yeah, another thing that you need to know, in addition to recognizing that poor market performance is not a given, is that no one can predict the future. So even as you see these headlines and as you hear people talk about, oh, and we're headed for recession, doom and gloom and bad, no one knows what the outlook is going to look like the rest of this year. No one knows what the market's going to do in the next 6, 12, 18, or 24 months. And if someone begins to tell you that they do know exactly what's going to happen, I would have my spidey senses immediately start to go off.
And then I think that probably now leads to what can you actually do? The first thing, look at your cash reserves.
It's great.
Where are you at with your cash reserves? Because I want you to have a plan that was good before we hit recession, if there is going to be a recession, that's going to be good during the recession,
right.
and even going to be good post-recession. So that's why those cash reserves is going to be a key part of this. Bo, I kind of teased it up, but I want you to kind of take it home. What do we mean when we talk about looking at your diversification?
Yeah, what we want you to have is a well-diversified portfolio based on your unique financial journey and based on where you are in your accumulation phase. I mean, if you're someone who's younger, it's okay to be more aggressive. But if you're someone who's further along, your portfolio should not be experiencing the same volatility as the broad markets because you diversify your assets across a number of different asset classes. So if you find yourself in this place where you're reading the headlines and you're looking at your account statements and you're getting very nervous and very uncomfortable, Brian already said it, this is a great time to recalibrate and think, okay, maybe my tolerance for risk is not quite where it should be, or maybe my portfolio does not accurately match my tolerance for risk. And I should think about pruning. Are there areas of my portfolio that I should tweak and adjust so that I have more peace going through volatile times? These are always a great time to reassess that, because when the market's going up and everything's happy and GDP is growing, everyone's aggressive, everyone's a cowboy, everyone loves to take on more and more risk. It's in times like this when there's uncertainty around that we begin to really see where our true risk tolerance lies.
And then let me give you the final thought here is, let me give you the financial mutant superpower. That's ABB. Always be buying. I'll even add the baby, because this gets so exciting. If you're trying to figure out how do you cut the blunt force off of volatility, buying into it can be an incredibly powerful tool. So if you're 10 plus years from retiring and you're looking at this and being like, oh my goodness, what do? I would tell you, just keep buying. Just buy into the volatility. You will be rewarded for staying the course. This is not the time to be emotional. This is the time just to measure twice, cut once, and make sure your plan reflects your future goals, but also maximizes the moment that we're currently living in.
I love it, Brian. I love that we get to be a voice of reason, even when the financial world is saying that things are crazy. I love when there are these huge headlines that are fear-inducing, and we get to slow down and say, hey, you know what? It's going to be okay. You have a good plan that's in place today, and it should be a good plan tomorrow, and it should be a good plan the day after. And I love that we can speak to those things. I love that we can answer the questions that you guys have. It's why we show up every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central to answer your question. So if you have a question you want us to weigh in on, we have the team out in the wings right now collecting your questions, and we would love to load you up because we really do believe that there is a better way to do money. So if you have a question, get it in the chat right now. And with that, Creative Director Reby, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Excellent, because I've got some questions in the hopper, and we're going to start off with Leandra Joe's question.
How do we do on the first part? Was it pretty good? You know,
I thought it was
the
great.
recession part, but like the opening
The
of the
April
show.
Fool's
like
part.
it was pretty good.
It was funny, yeah. People enjoyed it.
Awesome.
No, they didn't.
I didn't enjoy
I mean,
it.
in the chat, I think some of our friends who are here all the time definitely enjoyed it.
I already know that I'm a creature of habit, like creature of habit, a very I like things, I could not have liked that less. Like no part of that was enjoyable.
I want you to know, if you want to know how I'm punishing myself for even playing along with these shenanigans, when I came to the studio today, I realized that the LaCroix that's in my koozie here was left over from the last time we recorded. I don't remember. Was that last week? So a full LaCroix was sitting here, and I was like, I'm going to punish myself by drinking this lukewarm, flat LaCroix.
And lukewarm LaCroix sounds fantastic.
I don't know if maybe I've gone a bridge too far, but we're going to keep it going. What was the question?
Right. On that note, yes. I didn't get to it, but let's get to it now. Leandra Joe says, we're deep in the messy middle. We're in our 30s with 3 kids under 7.
Woo.
Well, 7 and under, to be fair. Living on one 100K income, and I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
What are the best ways to make our way to 25% savings rate from 14%?
No.
So maybe she just kind of is getting acquainted with the Money Guy rules. And of course, we talk about that investing rate of 25%. So can you talk about that?
I want to pause for a moment, Leandra, and I just want to say, good on you for being at 14% right now. So often we tell people, hey, you got to save 25. You got to save 25. You got to save 25. And that's true. That is where we want you to be. But you're in this season of life. You have 3 kids, 7 and under. You have a $100,000 household income on a single income in the household because one of you stays home. That's amazing that you're still able to save 14%. And I don't want to minimize that. I don't want you to lose track of the fact that, man, we're doing a hard thing right now, and that's great. And I love that you have this financial mutant mindset of, okay, I know I'm at 14, but I want to be at 25. What are some things and how are some ways I can move in that direction?
Well, first, let's make sure this is one of those moments where I always like to find secret pots that she might not even be counting, is that because that income is less than $200,000, I hope in that 14% she's counting the match. If there's an employer retirement plan and there's match, I do like people to include that in their 25%. So if your employer, let's say your employer requires you to put in 6%, so they give you 3%, you would actually have a savings rate of 9% just off of that plan. Not 6%, but 9% because of that 50 cents on the dollar matching. That's the first thing. I wanted to cut the corner off, because imagine if all of a sudden her 14% was actually 17%. Yep. Or maybe 14% actually could be as high as 18 to 20%.
Sure.
We've seen that in some of these generous employers out there. So that's the first tip I have. Bo, how do we, because now we got to think about it, because I don't think you don't build this all in one day.
No.
You don't build it in 1 year, especially while you're in the messy middle. Look, there's nothing wrong with being hard on yourself, with the fact that you should feel some type of, like there's a clock ticking in the background that is going to ring, meaning that you should feel some pressure that you need to be saving more for retirement. But I want you to give yourself enough grace to know this is going to take time to transition. So what's some incremental ways that they could, as a household, increase this?
Yeah, I think whenever, and this, Leander, this is for you, but this is also for anyone out there trying to figure out how do I get my lifestyle a little bit smaller so that I can increase my savings rate. Because whenever it comes to building wealth, we only really have two options. We can either make more money, go increase our income, or we can spend less money. That means decrease our expenses. And so I just wrote down sort of three quick things. I want to cut the bigs, then I want to cut the littles, and then I want to axe the waste. So I would take all of the expenses. I would say, what are the things we're spending a lot of money on every month? This might be car payment, insurance, mortgage or rent, utilities, all those types of things. And I'd try to figure out, okay, are there areas where I can improve that? When was the last time I shopped my insurance? Is my auto insurance just what I've been on for the past 6 years and I've never shopped it? And is there a way for me to maybe get a better rate? And I would start looking at all those big expenses and figure out how can I whittle those down. Okay, once I know that I've got my big expenses knocked out, then I go down to the little expenses and I want us to cut those, because I am not one of these people who advocates, oh, you just can't go out to eat at all if your savings rate isn't there. That's not true. Maybe going out to eat is something that's valuable for your family and it creates family time and you want to do that. But maybe if your eating out budget is $200 a month, you want to decrease that to $150 a month. Or maybe the gym membership that you have right now that you're not really using, maybe you can cut that out for a while and start doing stuff at home. Or you figure out what are the little expenses that I don't have to get rid of, but I can minimize to create additional margin. And then the third thing I would do is and I think all of us have these things in our budget that are just waste. Oh, I was at the grocery store and I grabbed the Butterfinger, or I stopped at Starbucks just because it was on my thing, or I wasted the money here, I did the thing there, or whatever that is. And you got to figure out where are those things and how can I target those things to completely cut those out. And if I do, cutting the big, cutting the littles, and then axing the waste, what I'm likely going to find out over the course of a few weeks or a few months is, holy cow, that equated to a couple extra $100 or maybe $1,000 or whatever that number may be for you. And if you can then redirect and deploy those dollars towards your savings, all of a sudden you're going to recognize, holy cow, I was at 14%, but now I'm at 16%, I'm at 17%. It can have a meaningful impact.
Well, I think the underlying thing I'm hearing you talk about is actually doing the tracking and actually doing the budgeting.
That's right.
And if you are not doing that, I would encourage you to at least go start running using one of the apps, do a spreadsheet, whatever you need to actually start tracking where's your money going. And then after you've had a little experience, a few weeks to a month of actually tracking the expenses, now let's actually do some zero-based budgeting. What do you actually need to do? What's a want? What's a need? And then the other thing I was going to say is, because Bo was talking about the two levers. So we're talking about the expenses is where we primarily focus.
Sure.
The second one is you got to increase your income. Well, over time, that typically happens. What I like to say, for especially somebody in their messy middle, when you get your next pay raise, your spouse gets their next pay raise, I encourage you to try to see if you could get 60% of that pay raise to go towards additional saving and investing.
Yep.
That way you still get a little bit to help you through this messy middle, to get a little grace in your lifestyle. But do try to apply 60% of that pay raise towards increasing this from 14% to maybe you go to 16 to 18%, depending upon what the pay raise was for the year. And then slowly you work your way out. And then before you know it, you're going to look back and go, holy cow, we are saving and investing 25% and knowing where we are in this process. And this is another thing I would encourage you down the road, not while you're right in the middle of it, but maybe after you've done some of these initial things we've talked about. There's nothing wrong with going to learn.moneyguy.com and looking at the Know Your Number course and seeing that way you can actually have a measurement. Are you ahead of the curve, behind the curve, or right where you're supposed to be? Because I think you might find out, depending upon where you are in your 30s, plus, what your monthly living expenses, you might be in a better shape than you even realize, but you do need to do the homework to kind of know that.
Yep. I had one more thing.
But go ahead.
There's one more thing. I have so much compassion and so much empathy for messy middle, because, oh my gosh, it's messy. I know some people who've done everything. Like, Bo, I've cut and we're lean and we're doing this and we're doing this, and 14% is the number. That's great. That's great. Recognize it may be for a season, because you just said you got 3 kids, all 7 and under. Maybe one of those kids is in daycare, or maybe one of those. Maybe there's some sort of cost. maybe something will shift in your life as you move through the messy middle. And it's okay. You know that right now 14% is going to be your number, but in 2 years, there's light in the tunnel. The kid's going to start kindergarten or whatever the thing is. And okay, boom, now I can go get a part-time job, or I can, we're not going to have the daycare cost, or whatever that thing is, and then I'm going to be able to save. That's okay. I don't want you to like absolutely hate life right now because you're not hitting that number, because the messy middle is messy, man, right?
This reminds me of that. We just did a Making a Millionaire episode where that exact situation, where in 2 years, things were going to change dramatically just off of daycare alone. So while you're in the messy middle, pay attention to those things and then see, there's nothing wrong with measuring twice on what assumptions are going to be changing. But my encouragement, once again, it's back to that ticking clock in the background. When some of those expenses go away, like daycare, actually do something productive with it. When it, don't just let that turn into additional consumption. Actually try to turn that into additional money because you feel a little behind.
Love it.
Yeah, that was great. I think sometimes you have to remember it is a goal. Like next year could look completely different. So I love what you guys said.
She's staying, she's at the house, so that maybe that. But it's still, there's additional programs. There's whether you're doing Mother's Morning Out or other things, there's costs that will go away as those children start getting a little bit older.
Right.
I mean, heck, diapers alone,
buddy.
Especially if you use fancy diapers like Bo.
Hey, what's the
shots fired?
I'm asking for a friend. What's the age range that boys potty train? Anybody know?
I know you're looking at me because I'm a boy mom, but I don't know. Figuring that out as we speak. I'll let you know.
I'm ready for it. Me and my wife, we were out of this whole diaper thing.
I think it's anywhere from like 2 or 3.
Okay.
It depends on the kid.
I mean, I'm old, so I don't know. I bet boys are slower.
That's what I've heard.
I've heard that.
Are boys slower at everything?
I have heard that actually. I don't know. I think it depends on the child.
Jen and I, we were in this sweet spot. Our girls were out of diapers and we were living the good life, and then we just got thrown back into these. I'm ready for this diaper stuff to be gone. Like every time I change his diaper, I'm like, bud, we got to fix this, man. We got to do something.
By the way, I've heard this is way too much information. I spend a lot of time with Bo, and his family FaceTimes him at constant times, and I've heard his boys celebrating.
Hey, Daddy Poop!
Yeah.
Hey, the potty humor is here.
Yeah. There's big celebrations in the Hanson household.
I love it.
I'm not making it up. It really happens. We're in the middle of a content
boys,
meeting,
let us know.
and you hear his son bragging about his movements.
Proud boy.
All right, you ready for the next question? Bert Beasing has a question. He says, I'm a new college grad thinking through my insurable needs. I don't have a spouse or kids right now, so I know life insurance isn't a priority yet. But what about disability insurance? Is that something I should be looking into at this stage of life? And if so, what kind should I consider? And when should you be considering all of these insurances is really the question.
Way ahead of the curve.
I know.
Bert, I love this question. I love that you are thinking through this, because a lot of people don't realize this, and I think this is a little bit of a hot take. Early on in your career, early on in your financial journey, I counsel young people all the time. Like, I'll be looking at their expenses and I'll be like kind of going through it with them, and I'll see this thing and it's like, $50 a month, or it's actually less than that, $20 a month, and it's like life insurance, and I'll be like, well, hey, why do you have life insurance? Like, oh, well, I just, I signed up and I was able to do this, and I had a friend who was selling, and I'm like, man, I don't know that you have a need for life insurance. No one is dependent upon your income. If something were to happen to you, there's no one who's going to be put out because you're not able to go generate that wealth. So you really don't have an insurable need on your life at this time. And so it sounds like Bert understands that and recognizes that, but a lot of young people don't. They just think, okay, I'm an adult, I've got obligations now, I'll go buy life insurance. That's not the case. It's not something that you have to have right on. But then the second question is a really interesting one. All right, so disability insurance. And for those that don't know, this is a type of insurance that if you were to become disabled and unable to, and Brian will talk more about this, perform your job or perhaps perform any job, then there is a benefit that you can receive so that you can provide for your well-being. So the question becomes, Who needs disability insurance? When do you need disability insurance? How do you decide what kind of disability insurance? And what do you know about disability insurance?
I have to pick on you about your answer on that a little bit. Like, if somebody has $20 a month coming out, I'm probably not going to pick on them about that. But even though they don't have a huge, just because of down the road they might have a medical, situation, they're not as insurable. But what I see is that, because you mentioned a buddy who sold it to them, it's the whole life policies where it will be 20 times the 20. So they have a $400 a month premium. And then I'll be like, yeah, what are you doing? You have nobody. But that's basically like they just didn't get Starbucks 2 or 3 times. And so I'm just picking on you. You're spot on, but 20, I would have said $400 a month, because that could be funding your Roth IRA instead of funding a whole life policy for your college roommate that is tipping their hat towards insurance sales. We've all been there, or know somebody who's done that. But when it comes to disability, this is what Bo's talking about. First of all, your employer might very well offer disability insurance. And there's nothing wrong with looking at that. And then there's quite a few tips that I want to give on this. First of all, you always want to pay for disability with your money after tax, meaning if your employer offers a deduction through your payroll, be careful if it lowers your income taxes, because the reason I say that is because if you pay your disability insurance premiums with after-tax money, meaning that money was subjected to income taxes before you paid the premium, if you become disabled, that insurance will pay out completely tax-free. That's great. You can imagine, because a lot of times you don't have to have 100% replacement if you take out the income taxes. You might only, especially if it's tax-free, you might only need to replace 60% of your income, because you're not having to cover the income taxes, the Social Security and Medicare taxes and all the other things. So that's why be very careful how you pay for your disability insurance. The second thing is what Bo was alluding to. Is it ONOC or is it ENEOC, meaning occupation? If you're a person that is in a very specialized career, and you see this with doctors, you see this with all kind of people, where you might be, if you just go by a general disability policy that's very affordable, you might be sorely disappointed to find out that as long as you can go be a greeter at the local hardware value store, that you don't qualify for disability. But you're like, well, wait a minute, my family or potential future family might need this. Then I would just pay attention to those description terms, because that will impact the premium. And look, if you're super healthy, typically you want to buy your own policy outside the employer. But I have to say, but there might be, like, your employer might be buying through a trade association or something like that. So it's one of those things where you kind of need to try it both ways to see. Disability is a little different than life insurance in that aspect, because I know I buy my disability from both of my trade organizations. I have like the AICPA as well as the NAPFA Financial Planning Group. That's how we bought our disability, is because those trade organizations usually work with insurance companies specifically for your industry, and they give you a pretty good deal. So so if you're in a specialized industry, see if there's some type of membership benefit or industry specific policy that you might be qualifying for as well.
So for your question, Bert, is this something you should be considering? Absolutely. Is it something you should investigate? For sure. Is it likely that you have an insurable need? If you were to become disabled, you would still need to have cash flow coming in? Yeah. So I think this is often one that we see is incredibly uninsured and a lot of people avoid. And yet it's one of the ones that's probably more likely to happen. What was it? Something like 1 in, I'm going to mess this stat up, Nick, but don't correct me.
Here, before you give a stat, because we don't know the stat, is that we're all going to die, but you're more likely to become disabled while you're working age than you are to die.
That's exactly right.
That's the stat without giving the percentage.
Okay.
4 times more likely.
4 times
there we
more
go.
likely.
There we go. That's why we have outside researchers that can
4
real
times.
time make us look smart. Thank
Love
you, Nick.
it. Well, wonderful. Bert Beasing, great question. Thank you for asking it, and I hope that helps you as you think through that. And way to be on it.
By the way, I wasn't trying to pick on you.
About what?
It's just when you said $20 a
No,
month. And
no,
I was just like,
I'm ready to
I
fight
wasn't trying
about
to be.
this. I didn't
He
want
was
to
ready
belabor
to
the question.
fight.
I'm ready to fight because you know what I would tell you to do. As soon as you said, "Oh, it's only $20," I'd be like, Brian, I want you to go to moneyguy.com/resources. I want you to check out our wealth multiplier tool, and I want you to see that even for a 20-year, even just $20 a month, that's $240 a year. What that can turn into by the time that you turn 65. We know that this $1 koozie cost me $88. Take that one, multiply it by 240, and it will be 88 times 240. It's huge. So boom, $20.
Don't discount it, Brian.
I know. I just.
Hey,
I like
did
how
say-
I'm telling you that. Like you're like the biggest proponent of that concept.
You did say something earlier, though. You said you were talking about an episode of Making a Millionaire where we talked about this. If you guys, two things. If you've not checked out Making a Millionaire yet, you should, because we love doing it every other Monday. We have a brand new episode come out. We just had a brand new episode come out this week. And the way that you can know when we have new content released is if you subscribe. If you're not subscribed right now, you will not get notifications. You will not know when we release new content. And we have some exciting new content coming your way every single week.
By the way, I'll share because I did this. I feel like I'm the old man on the porch, or just call me like Uncle Buck. You know, is that I feel like I have to share.
Okay.
Why would we call you Uncle Brian?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You can call me Uncle Brian too, but Uncle Buck's more fun. Here's the thing. We just like when we came out with Making a Millionaire, and everybody knows we know Caleb. A lot of you guys, there was some negativity towards Caleb, and I was like, please, guys, let's keep it on the up and up. Well, I've started noticing a trend sometimes when we do these Making a Millionaire that the comments have been harsh on our guests. Now, look, I expect we're gonna pick on Bo's mustache. And
Nothing to pick on there.
That's fair
there's
game.
a lot to be, and that's fair game because he knows. And I make fun of I'm I pick on myself that I can't grow facial hair myself, but it does bother me because everybody who comes on Making a Millionaire volunteers to do this, and we try to make a win-win scenario. Meaning, and Bo tells us every guest that comes on the show, we let them know that not only do we want this to be engaging content that hopefully you, the audience, are going to learn something for, but I want the people who are willing to put their financial life out before the world to kind of leave feeling like this was a good experience. And it hurts my heart when I see physical traits kind of hit on these, because these are just general people. And then even, I don't know, it's just there's things that I was like, I don't know that the people who
saying
are
just be
posting these
kind.
comments would say it to these people's faces, and that bothers me because I know the internet, it lets you do that and feel like you're getting away with it, but these are real people sharing their real lives. These are not paid actors. They get a hotel stay. I think I'll say some of them do, because some won't even take that. It's kind of crazy how great the people who have volunteered to go on Making a Millionaire have been. But I just say treat them like you were in the room with them, and be kind.
Love it.
You heard it from Uncle Brian. Be kind. And I agree.
Uncle Buck.
Uncle Brian.
Well, anybody who's my age and knows John Candy.
Because I was going to say John Candy,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, Uncle
We
Buck
know
was the
what
best.
you were. Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
We know.
And once again, it confirms, yeah. John Candy as an uncle, probably a lot better than Uncle Brown.
All right. You ready for the next question?
Yes, ma'am.
Alyssa B asks, is it okay to be more aggressive in your portfolio mix when you're trying to catch up for retirement? I want to help my mom start on her retirement. She's turning 49 this year and she's starting at 0. What do you think? Because I know you have thoughts about how aggressive you should be. What if you're starting later?
I liked your question, Alyssa, when in my head it was going this way. Is it okay to be more aggressive in your strategy when you're behind? To which I would unequivocally say, yeah, if you're behind and you're starting at 0 later in life, man, you do have to be aggressive. You have to save aggressively. You have to cut expenses. You have to make hard decisions. You have to do some aggressive things in order to make up for lost time. But you kind of went a slightly different direction. You said, is it okay to be aggressive in my portfolio? Which means take on more risk than likely would be appropriate given my circumstances. And that one makes me a little nervous. That one I don't know that I'm willing to sign off on.
I'll give you some experience share and then tell you some actual terms that you can do a little research on to see why we have this hesitation. I have been managing money since the mid '90s, and I can tell you many times this is a common trend you see with people. They figure out personal finance at a later age, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to let my money work as hard as possible. And I think about the late '90s where everybody was just buying all the tech funds. Loading up, and they were so happy because for a period it was working because we were crushing it. You had 20+% for 2 or 3 years in a row. They're like, but trees don't grow to heaven, and here's why you have to be careful just loading it up on what the latest and greatest trend is that seems to be doing growing that tree to heaven. Is that there's two terms. There's risk tolerance. That's the term where when you have the ability, when the market has volatility, are you immediately going to reach for the sell button because emotionally it's just too much for you to handle? That's what, and whenever you sign up as a client with like a brokerage company or anybody, they're usually going to do some type of attention to risk tolerance because it's a compliance thing as well. Is how much risk can you handle before you call and cry uncle? I don't know why I have this uncle theme going through today.
A bunch of uncle today.
But that's risk tolerance. The second thing that people never talk about, it's that component of risk that's kind of the silent part, but it is a very powerful part. It's called risk capacity. Is that as you get older, and you said your mother is 49 years of age. Now look, if she's going to traditional 65 on her work life, then just her time horizon allows her to be more aggressive. But then just because she's got 16 years before she's actually retiring, that time horizon is going to allow some aggressiveness just because you're 16 years from actually reaching the date. However, if you tell me your mom is trying to retire at 55 and she's 49 years of age right now and starting at zero, you might actually be cutting your knees out by taking on more risk, because what happens is that you get too close to retirement age. Let's just say this thing works out spectacularly for the first 3 years and you take all this risk, but then the year that she's getting ready to retire and you get a sequence of return failure, meaning that all of a sudden the market goes down 40%. It does happen, by the way. Go look at the Great Recession. And then all of a sudden you see your portfolio get almost halved. And you have to ask yourself, how many years would it take for my portfolio to recover? And if it's like 6 years, 7 years, because you took so much risk in the portfolio. Because remember, if you lose 50% of your money on an investment, what do you have to make to recover that money? It's not 50%. You have to make 100%. Right. And if you think about the average rate of return that we're telling people is 8% a year, and then you just lost, you have to have 100%. You start doing the math and you go, oh my gosh, this is going to take a decade. Well, I got to live off this money. You don't have the time to actually recover. That is what is called risk capacity. You might be the biggest cowboy, the cowgirl, where risk tolerance it's just water off a duck's back. But I'm telling you, if you don't pay attention to risk capacity and your ability to have the time to recover, you're going to have a failure that you might not be able to recover from.
Yeah, I think a good resource I would point you towards, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we have a deliverable called How Much Should You Save? We oftentimes say, incorrectly call it, what can 25% do for you? But this is a great one to show. Based on savings rates, how much of your income could you replace at different ages with different savings rates? Well, if your mom is 49 years old, I'd point her to, okay, if you're 50 years old, what would your saving rate need to be, and what kind of income replacement can that create for you? And what you might have to do is redefine what retirement looks like. It may not look like the traditional age 65, completely leaving the workforce, but it may be something where it's a graduated step down from work to at least get moving in that direction. But it's a great resource you can use to figure out what is still possible in this next 16 years.
And remember, when we do retirement planning, you're basing it off of the expenses you'll need in retirement. And don't forget to take into account like Social Security and other things to really hone in on what is that goal you're trying to build for. Or build to.
Love it.
Alyssa B., thank you for that question. I hope that helps as you think through helping out your mom.
By the way, it shows me, like, I literally can never remember what that resource is called. How much did you save? It showed me you do actually know what it's called. You just feign, like,
Solidarity, brother.
issues to make me feel better about
No,
my
it's
inability.
it's solidarity, brother.
So well done.
Thanks, man.
We always knew he was a smart one.
I don't know. I think it's
Salt shaker talents just
You're
going
a dream team.
coming down the assembly line.
No.
Big biceps, pectorials. We'll give him some IQ too.
wow, high praise.
Tell me more. That's
High praise.
Facial hair? No.
Oh,
Salt shaker
Salt shaker got dipped up on the facial hair.
Yeah, for every compliment, somebody brings Bo back down too. That's how the comments are as well.
Believe me, you ought to see me and his wife together. We love
it's-
just
it's-
nothing better than
lots of
picking on Bo.
humility there.
Just keeps you honest. All right, we're going to move on to Kurt B's question. It says, I am 25 years old.
Is it still lukewarm?
Oh my
Is it
gosh,
still
what
flat?
am
Are
I
you still
doing?
drinking
I
it?
totally forget myself that
Why?
I'm drinking like week-old LaCroix. It's fine.
Why? Look, our team is already like,
No,
Brian,
let's go.
we got-
I'm
we got
going.
one in
I'm
the
down
wings for
now.
ya.
We're doing-
Got a new drink.
Was it self-flagellation where you
That is
punish yourself for the
sunk
sake
cost
of it?
fallacy at its worst.
Oh, did you hear what she just said?
What?
That is sunk cost fallacy.
Oh my
at
gosh,
its-
that is-
Look at Reby throwing out the financial bombs right there.
Learn from
Little
the best.
Behavioral finance.
You know what? She's
Look
right.
at that.
Sunk cost fallacy. Let's get rid of this.
Yes.
This is horrible.
Use Brian's own logic to convince him.
I need a stash though. So since I can't grow up my own, we'll just trade cans.
Okay, now that Brian has take a sip,
Hang on.
make sure you're nice and refreshed. Then we'll get back to the personal
Oh my
finance.
gosh, that is. I'd be a product placement for a cold version of this.
LaCroix, if you're looking for sponsorships, you can write sponsorship@moneyguy.com.
Oh, don't do that.
That's not really a thing. I'm just kidding. That's not a thing.
Yeah,
You can reach out
You
to
see
us, though.
Reby? You see how nervous Reby got?
Well, we don't. That email doesn't exist. That'd be sad.
Winner.
Reach out to winner@moneyguy.com. That one does exist. All right. Now that we've recovered from our sunk cost fallacy,
Thank you, Reby.
let's talk to Kurt B. He says, I am 25 years old, about to graduate business school with $37K in student loans at 7%. I have invested $66K in the market. Is it worth me pulling money out of the market and paying off my loans entirely? I just got a job.
Here's what I'd like to know. One, it's very difficult to give specific financial advice not knowing your specifics, right? But I've kind of got some leanings and some inklings here. And what I would like to know is, if I were to look at that $66,000, what type of accounts is it in? You're 25 years old, about to graduate business school. So I'm gonna guess you're probably working at some like points in time along the curve. I'm hoping some of that $66,000 is in Roth IRAs. I'm hoping you were loading up those Roth IRAs while you had that earned income coming in. And so if that's the question, should I cash out my Roth IRAs and go pay off this high interest student loan debt? I don't think I'm gonna vote for that. Or maybe this 66 is something that it was a gift from family earlier in life, and they gifted you some stock from the publicly traded company in the town that you leave, and it's highly appreciated. And so if you were to now sell that, you're going to incur a significant capital gain on that because it's gone up in value. Would I go cash that out and liquidate that and pay off that high interest debt? Maybe not. Here's what I would like for you to do. You're 25 years old, about to graduate from grad school and start your first job. At 25 years old, with student loans at 7%, we would argue that that is high interest debt. Brian, do you have the thing that you can hold up? Can you hold the thing? We have a 9-step tried and true process of what to do with your next dollar. And in step 3, we call that high interest debt. And so even though you've gotten a little out of order in terms of you built up some wealth before that, I do think as you begin your career, as you get your first job, as you begin to move along on your financial trajectory, I don't think there's anything wrong with attacking and knocking out that student loan debt super early on in the journey. But I don't know that you have to take assets that are currently invested and working for you, axe those assets, and then squash that debt. Agree, disagree, want to fight?
I think I disagree with you a little bit because here's where I am.
Okay.
This is $37,000 of debt at 7%, which that's pretty high on the interest rate. He's got $66,000. Now, what I don't know, look, I will agree with you. If this is Roth money, that one would give me
That's a rough
heartburn
one.
to pull out. But if this is after-tax money, meaning that it's got some tax basis, first question is how much of this is a taxable gain? But if assuming that and realize you might be you're a student currently, you might qualify for 0% capital gains in that first year.
Okay.
It depends on when you start your career, what your income. But look into the 0% capital gains rate, and then compare that to what your new income, your partial year income is going to be after you graduate, and see if there might be an opportunity to get this money tax free. And then here's the second thing: you got a third, because that's the one component. The next component is kind of like a quarterback throwing the ball. You don't throw where the receiver is currently. You throw where the receiver is going to be when they intersect. Because the player once you start working, you're running just like that receiver is. So I don't discount how much you could actually save over the next 6 to 12 months. Because if you are just being a financial mutant asking this question at 25, you might realize, oh man, this is because I've been in school a little bit extra. I've got a unique skill set and I've landed this great job. I think I'm going to be able to save $1,000 a month, as part of, and use this as your backbone. We know you already have step one, as long as a portion of that account, that $66,000, hopefully some of this is cash equivalent to cover your highest deductible. Of course, with your brand new job, once you start, you're going to make sure you get your employer match. So you get that 50 to 100% rate of return. But then when you get here, I would look at, okay, if I got $37,000 I want to extinguish, I think over the next 9 months, I can save up, $8,000 of this. I'm going to take $29,000 of my 66, assuming I can get this for not paying a gazillion dollars in taxes that's going to undermine it. And then I'm going to, over the next 6 to 9 months, going to pay off the other remaining $9,000. And that way you finish your first year out with this extinguished. Now, that's just, I can't give you, that's just a scenario, because personal finance is very personal. I don't know your tax rates. I don't know all the other components of your income and so forth. But that's just a kind of doing a share if I was kind of looking at this from a situation that gives you the best of all worlds. What do you think?
Okay, I think we could. You know what? I think it's okay for us to disagree a little bit, because I don't think either one of those is wrong. I think that either. What I do, like you said, I think you should have a finite timeline on which you should satisfy the student loan debt. Because what I'm seeing is, if you are graduating from grad school, you're going to be let's assume a higher income, higher starting salary when you come out. If you can get that student loan debt knocked out in the first year, 24 months or so.
It's high interest debt, though.
I know.
7% is high.
I know, but you know what makes it even more, what makes that interest cost even more costly is if you got to go incur taxes in order to be able to satisfy
hopefully he's in a lower, the income, even if he's in a higher income, it's going to be a partial year. He's going to be 15%. Hopefully he lives in a no-tax state.
I'm not trying to convince you to come onto my side.
I'm trying to convince you.
I think this is where personal finance is very personal. And it comes down to your unique circumstance and your unique goals. I think that either one of those solutions is acceptable.
Well, there you go, Kurt. You have a
He's
couple
like,
of options.
No, right.
Ryan is not for having a couple of
belaboring
options.
it.
But regardless, those are really good thoughts for you to think through. Thank you for asking the question, and we hope it helps as always.
Can we do something can we poll the audience just out of curiosity? Say, what would you do, financial mutants? Would you use the 66 to pay off debt, or leave the 66 invested? Just to be curious.
Is that it? It's just an A/B.
Is there a third? I thought there were two
Did you want
options
an
that we were
essay for
talking
the poll?
about.
How
What's the
would you
third?
set it up?
I don't know. I'm going to drink some more of my cold water.
All right.
Cold stash water.
That sounds gross.
On that note, moving on to S. Sand's question. It says, the wife and I are 28 and 33 and on step 7 and on track with our number, meaning the retirement number. How do you weigh the opportunity cost of a needed home repairs, home improvements, and seeing our wealth multiplier?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, here's something that's interesting, Bo, because a lot of people get confused on this, is because when you get to step 7, that means that you've already passed step 6, which means you're saving and investing 25% of your gross income.
That's right.
So if I was S. Sand, a lot of people go, well, why wouldn't I immediately be in step 8, which is abundance goals or prepaid future expenses? Well, I love that S. Sand is really giving it the respect that step 7 is the first place where you kind of pause, because steps 1 through 6 are very progression. They're progressing with a very purposeful, whether it's emergency reserves, keeping you from making desperate decisions. And then after you get through keeping you from making desperate decisions with the 2 steps that are cash-based, there's maximizing free money. There's making sure you're not turning compound interest upside down by working against you with step 3. And then, of course, we've got all the tax incentivized savings of Roth, health savings accounts, and even your employer plan. Step 7 is the first step that allows you to say, hey, how am I actually going to use this money, or when will I need this money? So, S. Sand, I hate to answer a question with a question, but the question is when will you plan on using this money? Like if you're part of the FIRE movement or FINE movement, financial independence, next endeavor, where you think that, hey, I'm not going to do a traditional retire at 60 to 65. I think I'm going to drop out at 50. You have different savings goals than somebody who is going to plan on working until they're 60. So that needs to kind of be taken into account to figure out. But if you are, and you figure out that especially if you use a resource like Know Your Number,
Sure.
and you go to Learn.Money Guy and you find out, are you ahead of the curve, behind the curve, or right where you need to, and you find out you're ahead of the curve, then I would say you're actually graduating from step 7 to step 8, and by all means, go upgrade that kitchen.
Yeah, I think your question was, how do I weigh the opportunity cost between doing these home improvements or the fact that I will recognize that at 28 and 33, our wealth can multiply substantially over the long term. And when I hear that, I think it's really a goals-based question. What are the ultimate goals that I have or that we have? Because if you're in step 7 and you're already saving 25%, you're doing all the things, but you're just saying, okay, man, yeah, I know I can do the home improvements, but if I do that, now that money's not going to be working for me. You guys have to figure out, where does that fall on your priority hierarchy. Now, here's a really practical example. Let's say that your family's grown and you got a bunch of kids, and inside of your current home, you've recognized that, man, we got 2 of the kids sharing a room, or maybe all 3 of the kids sharing a room, and we have an unfinished space over here. Man, we could really go for finishing this space. And we finish that space, it's going to allow the kids to spread out. It's going to give us another bedroom. It's really going to increase our standard of living that we're experiencing right now every single day. If I'm already in step 7 and I'm already doing all the 25% and I'm doing those sort of things, well, okay, yeah, if I spend whatever it is going to cost to renovate that and to do that, yeah, that money's not going to be working for me. But there is very real family value that takes place by me improving the home in which we live so that it better works for us. And you can feel that for outdoor living or for a kitchen or for whatever the thing is inside your family. But you have to figure out how much of a priority is that. I mean, you could do it with something like a swimming pool. Okay, hey, I really want a swimming pool. Okay, great. But is the swimming pool going to be worth the opportunity cost of those dollars in the future working for you? Some people are going to answer that question in the affirmative. Yeah, absolutely. I want this to be the thing that my family does, and I want this to be the experience that we have. And I'm not sacrificing financial independence. I'm just sacrificing how big the number's going to be. That's okay. But if you look at it and say, okay, I can do this, but man, it doesn't really matter if we have a theater room in the house. That's not something that's like so valuable. Maybe it doesn't make sense to do that yet. Maybe you set some goal that once our net worth hits this, or once we get our account value here, then we will reward ourselves with doing the home improvement. You have to decide where the priority lies and what that, especially if you have like kids in the house, where the timeline is on actually being able to do that home improvement.
I think you're spot on. I mean, the big thing, the way I would put it is, you have to have a conversation with your current self, but also your future self, and make sure that you're giving them both a seat at the table, because I don't want you to get to be 50 years old and have regrets that you were living not a financial mutant life, but a financial miser life in your 20s and 30s. Because I want you to look back with a smile on your face and say, I lived my 20s the way I should have. I lived my 30s. I lived my 40s. That's why we're very intentional. I think you're at the right place, because, man, are we nerdy on the numbers, but man, oh man, are we also super sentimental about making sure that you understand that money is only a tool.
Love it.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I do have some results on that poll. We asked the financial mutants in the live chat, what would you do? Would you leave that money invested or would you use it to pay off the debt? 65% said they would leave it invested.
Whoa!
True financial mutants.
Whoa, Bo whooped me. Do you see that? I'm like beat down and I'm like, oh my God.
Take another sip of that cold LaCroix, Brian.
We got some.
I'm
Well
not
done,
really
Bo.
surprised because, I mean, I feel like we talk so much about the power of compound interest and the
Yeah.
wealth multiplier. Like there's something
Yeah.
to consider there. We've trained them well. That's what I'm hearing.
But I want to be very clear. With
You know what? I know what
was
we
it
were
Kurt?
missing in that
Kurt.
in that poll. You should have taken a sad face with my bottom lip puckered out and see if that swayed the vote.
that's what it
any.
could have done.
It could-
Yeah.
I could have
that
lobbied
would have
this a little
completely
harder.
changed it.
Love it. Kurt, if you did make the decision, I'm going back with 2 questions. Sorry. If you did make the decision to cash out some of it or maybe cash out all of it and pay it off, I think that's perfectly permissible and okay. I want to be
Yeah.
clear. It's not like one way or the other. I think this is one that there's a little bit of gray there.
Yeah. Some
at you
nuance.
trying to be nice.
Some
Like,
personal
there are
finance.
there
Bridge
are
builder.
many paths.
Bridge builder, Bo.
There are many paths to wealth, and I think that's okay.
Not wrong. All right, we do have another question queued up. It's from Alana R. It says, can saving to 25% be a financial miser? We, we're 31 and 36, just crossed 200K and are saving 2 times the amount needed without Social Security. However, our investment rate is only 17%. Yet, we constantly argue about money.
Alana
What do
didn't
you
give her
think?
age, did she?
Yes, she did. 31 and 36.
31, 36.
So that's her
I
and
see
her,
it
like,
now.
yeah, 2 spouses.
All right, so I want to reframe this. Okay, you guys say to save 25% of my gross income. Is it possible that I can get to the place where if I'm saving 25% of my gross income, I'm actually being a financial miser? Brian, I love hearing you talk about this because you said that you've had friends and colleagues and acquaintances in your life who had this goal of saving and saving and saving and saving and saving and saving. And even we got the point to where just based on the mathematics alone, they were going to be fine. Like the portfolio was big enough, it was going to grow. They had done all the hard work early on, but they could not take their foot off the gas. And you said, hey, that actually led to like some very real intangible marital problems. And you even in your marriage, you said early on to your wife, you said, hey, if we can kill it in our 20s and we can be so aggressive saving in our 20s and 30s, in our 40s, we're going to give ourselves permission to let off the gas. So you even started on that. So can it be detrimental or can saving 25% past a certain point actually be a negative?
For sure. I mean, but,
Yes,
but
agreed.
without
Agreed,
a doubt,
agreed.
I mean, the thing is you have to just make sure you do the work to know if you really are at that place. Because I always worry,
Because 31, 36 is still pretty young.
it's young, but it's at least not, because I always worry about like my 27 and 28-year-olds who are killing it from an income standpoint, and they start saving and investing, and they go, I think I got enough. I can start dialing it back because I've run the projections, and since I have 25 years or 30 years of compounding growth, I don't need it. And I'm always like, yeah, but you haven't really built your assets up to a critical mass where it's actually your army of dollars is big enough where your future is kind of assured for you. Because here's the problems when you're in your 20s and even 30s is life just has a lot of stuff that's going to come your way. You know, I'm always amazed at people who think they can leave the workforce or make big drastic decisions when they're in their early 30s, even up to 40s or so, is because you don't even know how many kids are you going to have. Are the kids going to have any medical issues? Are you going to have some disability or struggles, you know, that impacts your ability to earn money the way you think you are? There's just life just has a way of humbling you if you're not careful, and you need to plan for those contingencies. But I think that it's definitely one of those things where if y'all are fighting about this all the time, that breaks my heart a little bit, because you know, y'all are financial mutants who are talking about it. I would encourage you to maybe see if you can redirect some of that energy into more of a positive action. Because one of the things, like we did a Making a Millionaire last week, where I got a couple and I was like, look, for the next 2 years, really 2 to 3 years, your life might be harder because you've got to make some key decisions in the next 2 to 3 years. And if you can do this and gamify it as a couple and y'all are on the same page with it, your life is going to be changed forever. And I would actually turn this into a process. I mean, Bo and myself both take a full day off of work where we sit down with our spouses, go over our net worth statements, talk about the goals for not only the coming year, but for what are the things we're thinking about 2, 3, 5 years down the road. And I think it's just really helpful to take into account each other's perspective and make sure you're on the same page so that money is a healthy tool in the relationship. Because that's the thing that I worry about is, and the example Bo gave is he was a dear friend. Now he even does some work with the firm, where he was having, and you know, we were in a group together, and he shared that his spouse was having a lot of issue, that he was still asking for receipts every time that she went out to eat or did something, to the point that it created marital strife. And that's why, and I think about like that couple we met with for Making a Millionaire, for the next 2 years, it makes sense that they ought to track every expense that they have, because they are in a goal together. They're gamifying this. But I'll tell you what, after they reach that goal, maybe you don't have to hang on so tight and track every receipt, because hopefully you've moved from a budgeting plan to a money management plan where that money's automated and automatically going where it needs to. That's the type of stuff that I like couples to have, those open conversations, so it doesn't turn into something that's bubbling under the surface that could just rock you from the core. Because money is obviously one of those core things that people fight about and even leads to divorce. And I just don't want that to be your future, because you're already doing so many healthy things. You just need to continue to try to figure out how you facilitate this even better.
You want a hot take here?
Yeah.
For some people, spending money is hard. I know for most Americans, not hard at all.
Yeah.
But for some people, a lot of the folks in the audience, spending money is hard. Earlier on in our marriage, I would always just tell my wife we're broke. We're broke, we're broke, we're broke. We got no money. We're broke, we're broke, we're broke, we're broke. And then every year I'll do the net worth statement. She'd see the net worth changing, and she'd be like, wait. We're broke, but that says something different. What's going on here? And so we had this like tension around, I just wanted to save everything and not spend and not spend and not spend. And she didn't want us to decrease our savings rate. What the conversation that finally like kind of opened it up for us is we finally sat and said, okay, what do you want? What do you want to spend money on? It wasn't that she wanted us to save less than 25%. It was that there were goals that she had that we needed to be on the same page about. So I said, okay, if we're going to spend money, what do we need to spend money on? She's like, oh, well, I really want to travel. I want to go do this. And hey, I'd really like to redo this room in the house. I'd really like to think about doing this expansion. And we just kind of like listed those things out that we wanted to do. And what was amazing is when we listed those things out, we were actually able to still do those without sacrificing our savings goals. I think that a lot of times spouses think it has to be either or. Okay, if we're going to do this, then we can't save. Well, if you would just have a very candid conversation on, hey, what are the things we want to do? Oftentimes you find ways to make it work. Okay, yeah, we want to travel, so we're going to travel this year, but since we're doing that, we're not going to do this other thing. And since we're not doing this other thing, we're not going to have to pull down our savings and investing. We can actually stay at the same savings rate and still accomplish those things. It just allows you as a couple to more effectively and efficiently use your dollars for the things that matter and be on the same page about that.
Good communication.
That's it, man.
Hey, and if it's getting to the point where this is really causing strife, y'all go talk to somebody. I mean, I'm very transparent that, I've been married close to 30 years now. There's moments in your marriage where maybe you two, it's just not healthy the way things are you're communicating with each other, because it is leading to fights and stuff. It's amazing what bringing a third party in to kind of something you say, your spouse might hear, even though you keep saying it over and over, but bringing that third party sometimes can help break the log jam. And then you also, the other side of the coin is you might hear something that you're like, oh, yeah.
I should have heard that. Yeah.
And I probably I resemble that. I probably need to take that take that to heart.
Love it.
Well said, guys. Very well said. Thank you for the question, Alana. I hope that helps. And this was a great conversation today. Thank you to everyone who asked a question and talked to us about these things. We really appreciate you being here and making this conversation possible. Remember, the conversation continues over at moneyguy.com. Check out our free resources page where there's tons of free downloads and calculators that will help you continue to customize and consider all the things that we talk about on this show. So thanks for being here.
I thought that last question set up perfectly. We have a statement we like to say is there's more to wealth than money. And so, I mean, if you're not having good conversations with your loved ones about what's important, because believe me, it goes well beyond money. You can be very wealthy by just having good health, by just being around people that you just love spending time with. So make sure you're I know we run a financial show. So I want you to get into those analytics. Don't skip doing the homework. But man, oh man, make sure you're also leaning into all those other things that really give you the color and really give the zest to life. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy Team, out. Now I want to say zestfully clean.